In case none of you are familiar with the Sentry from my review of his introductory story, here's a quick rundown of events.
In 2000, Marvel introduced the Sentry, the alias of a man named Robert Reynolds. Reynolds would ingest a special serum that would grant him the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns. The drawback being that Reynolds eventually became addicted to the serum, and in trying to kick it, he became an agoraphobic schizophrenic trapped in a crumbling marriage. Eventually, Reynolds took the serum once more and set about visiting several contemporaries, like the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, the Hulk, and Spider-Man, who couldn't seem to remember him for some reason.
To help hype up the story, Marvel began floating the idea that the Sentry was actually a long-lost creation from Stan Lee and a recently deceased Marvel bullpen artist named Artie Rosen. Of course, this was all just a publicity stunt, and there never actually was an artist named Artie Rosen.
In the story, it was revealed that the Sentry's greatest adversary, the Void, was in fact the manifestation of the darker aspects of Robert Reynolds' personality. So when the Sentry took more of the serum to get stronger, so did the Void. This resulted in fears that the two warring personalities could eventually destroy everything. So the Sentry willingly mind-wiped his existence from everyone. When the Sentry returned, so did the Void. And a massive mind-wipe had to occur once again, except the story would end with the idea that the Sentry could never truly go away.
When writer Brian Michael Bendis began his revamp of the Avengers, he drafted the Sentry onto the team. Bendis cited the fact that many fans were complaining about the lack of new characters in mainstream comics. Yeah, that was something fans used to actually complain about, there not being new characters in mainstream comics. So, when a new character popped up, he should probably be utilized to the best of his ability.
The first story arc of New Avengers was called Breakout and involved a power outage at an island-based supervillain prison called The Raft. One of the inmates at the prison was Robert Reynolds, who was there for killing his wife. Still, he came to the aid of Matt Murdock, Foggy Nelson, and Jessica Drew by flying the villain Carnage into space and ripping him in half. Carnage got over it.
So what exactly is the deal with the Sentry? Why does he have his powers back? How did he kill his wife? Is the Void not far behind? Well, let's find out. This is New Avengers Volume 2, The Sentry.
Spider-Woman messages Iron Man about a possible escapee from the Raft popping up on the radar. Since she's with Wolverine, Luke Cage, and Spider-Man, who says hi by the way, there shouldn't really be need for any additional help. Which is good because Tony has business in the abandoned warehouse district. There are 5 individuals waiting for him. Reed Richards, Charles Xavier, Black Bolt of the Inhumans, Doctor Strange, and Namor.
Yes, this marks the first appearance of the Marvel Illuminati, a secret society that controlled the behind-the-scenes parts of many Marvel events over the next few years. Some of which we've actually covered on this show before.
The others address the reformation of the Avengers, with Xavier mentioning Wolverine bringing it up, and Namor being upset over getting left out of the loop. However, that's not what Tony Stark has called this meeting over. He wants to know more about Robert Reynolds. Except none of the Illuminati knows who Robert Reynolds is. Elsewhere on Long Island, a nubile teenage waif has her tanning session interrupted by a large man named Dirk Garthwaite. The young lady's father is a collector who has something belonging to Garthwaite. Soon the Wrecker is reunited with his crowbar.
The Wrecker is a longtime Thor villain who wields a crowbar that grants him the strength of a Norse god thanks to an enchantment by Loki. On one occasion, the crowbar was struck by lightning and that allowed the enchantment to be spread to 3 other individuals who would doubling team up with the Wrecker, doubling themselves the Wrecking Crew. You might remember them popping up in an Avengers storyline I covered called Under Siege.
The Avengers confront the Wrecker as he prepares to leave the home. He might just be one guy, but with that crowbar, the Wrecker doesn't go down easily. Finally, Spider-Woman confronts the villain. She doesn't fight him, though. Instead, she starts flirting with him. It's enough of a distraction for Wolverine and Luke Cage to get the crowbar away and bring the Wrecker down. Afterwards, Spider-Woman explains that when she's stressed out, she releases a pheromone that results in men suddenly becoming attracted to her, which is why there's been a lot of accidental on-turning going on at Avengers Tower recently. Elsewhere, S.H.I.E.L.D. forces have tracked down the Sentry's location as he's holed up in a cave in Nevada. Captain America and Iron Man try to talk to him, but he's certain that the Void is coming. The Void killed Bob's wife and will no doubt make quick work of the Avengers. Except Linda Reynolds is very much alive. On top of that, a man named Paul Jenkins is also there. He's the man who's been writing the Sentry comic books, and he created everything about the Sentry.
This does bring up one of the unique facets of the Marvel Universe, the fact that Marvel Comics exist in, well, Marvel Comics. This has popped up on several occasions, most notably the fact that in the second issue of the Fantastic Four, Reed Richards used Marvel Comics to hypnotize the Skrulls into thinking that Earth wasn't worth invading. Also, Marvel Comics played an important role in the creation of snack food tie-in hero Combo Man.
The shock of these revelations causes the Sentry to disappear in a flash of light. He returns back to the Reynolds home in a civilian identity, hoping for normalcy. He's interrupted by the sudden appearance of Emma Frost of the X-Men, who tells Bob to go outside. Bob sees the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, the Inhumans, and the X-Men at his house. They want to help, but the Void will be arriving soon. The Void soon makes its presence known and begins attacking the collective heroes. All except for Bob, Emma Frost, and Reed Richards, who is using a force field projector. Reed has a solution, but needs Bob's assistance. When Bob denies any ability to control the situation, Reed shows him a video of the Sentry. The Sentry has a message for his civilian identity. Yes, the Void is the darker half of Robert Reynolds' personality. But why is that? How did this happen? Bob wasn't always like this, so what's the deal? To that end, Bob Reynolds needs to do whatever is possible to figure this out and maybe end the Void forever. Bob relents and Emma enters his mind once more. She finds numerous parts of Bob's mind cordoned off, memories being held back by something. Bob sees the origin of the Sentry, him taking the serum he just found in his professor's lab. Except that's not what happened at all. Everything's been changed by something or someone. It's then that Emma gets access to one of the quarantine zones of Bob's mind. It contains a vision of someone manipulating the Sentry's mind to eliminate the hero's personality and create the Void in the process. Bob doesn't recognize the man, but Emma does. It's Jason Wingard.
Jason Wingard is a mutant known as Mastermind, and with a name like that, he obviously has psychic manipulation and illusory powers. Mastermind was a founding member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and he was also a member of the Inner Circle of the Hellfire Club alongside Emma Frost.
Another individual enters the scene, and his presence is enough to cause Bob to flip out once again. Outside in the real world, the Void's strength begins to increase. Desperate, Emma psychically reaches out and manages to get a hold of Linda Reynolds. She brings Linda into Bob's mind and tells her to focus on an important memory from both of their lives. Linda focuses on her third date with Bob, which is when the two fell in love. It's enough to snap him out of his funk, and he explains what happened. The man working with Mastermind was a villain called the General, whom the Sentry fought on several occasions alongside the X-Men. The General paid Mastermind to try to eliminate the Sentry telepathically. Emma elaborates that Jason Wingard never really knew the full extent of his abilities, and sometimes aspects of his manipulations would remain in people's minds, then spiral out of control over time. This is probably why the Void is as powerful as it is. She points out the Void can be defeated, but it's going to take time and help, and Bob will have to be a hero again to do so. But he'll have the aid of the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and the X-Men to help him. Bob accepts his destiny, and the Void vanishes. It's not completely gone, but he will work with Emma, Reed, and the others in stabilizing everything. He will also be working with the Avengers as the group returns to Stark Tower to find a new addition. The Watchtower, the Sentry's headquarters, has attached itself to the structure.
The Sentry would continue serving with various incarnations of the Avengers afterwards. However, the Void would never truly go away. In fact, at one point, the Sentry actually merged with the Void in an attempt to control his darker half. And with that, we conclude our look at New Avengers Volume 2, The Sentry. How was it? Well, for one thing, there's some spectacular artwork from Steve McNiven in it. I think it's just really top-notch work, really clean, crisp. All the characters are easy to identify. So there's that. And I do kind of like that they don't really cure the Sentry at all. The Void is still there and still pops up. They're working to help him. It's not a magical mental health cure-all. Mental health cure-all. You get what I mean. And I do think it's a really good Sentry story. Unfortunately, this is supposed to be a New Avengers story, and as a New Avengers story, it's, yeah, pretty threadbare. The story overall is meager at best in terms of Avengers action. I mean, they could have maybe used a few more scenes of them tracking down more raft escapees or anything like that. Again, just stuff to feature the team a little bit more than just focusing on the Sentry. Not to mention, I get the whole thing that Paul Jenkins was the guy who wrote the first Sentry miniseries and kind of conceived the idea alongside Rick Veitch. But still, Paul Jenkins doesn't really add much to the plot at all. In fact, the story itself, like I said, is very threadbare and meager. Basically, to pad this thing out, they had to include a bunch of dossier files on the raft escapees with some running commentary from characters like Spider-Man and Captain America. Which, yeah, again, just kind of screams padding. In fact, this whole thing screams padding, and, well, that's because it kind of was. If you remember, I reviewed the third volume of New Avengers called Secrets and Lies, and in that story, and in the preamble to that, I talked about how the book was having a lot of shipping delays, and they brought Steve McNiven on to basically kind of be sort of a stopgap thing to buy time for the regular artist David Finch to make sure the third volume came out on time. And it didn't really work. Not only was this volume that we're covering today massively delayed, but the third volume also has suffered from shipping delays as well. Now, I'm not picking on the artists for this one. I don't blame them for when a book gets delayed. I blame idiot comic book publishers who hotshot the solicits. So it's not all on them. But it does kind of lead to this story being very banal. Just nothing, really. And also, if you're not entirely familiar with the Sentry, I don't know if this would be a good jumping on point for you at all. I would much rather you read that introductory miniseries first, because that's actually pretty good. Still, it's not entirely bad, it's not terrible, so I am going to give New Avengers Volume 2, The Sentry, a D. And with that, let's see what we're doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, got a request for the show? Check out my Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcatproductions. And if you like the video, give it a like, share it, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.